I smile pretty much every time I remember that my dad every year would fill out this back before you did it online, you did it on paper. But he would fill out the application for the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes. And if I don't know how you can possibly miss the fact that these days there's a ton of money they are giving away, and I'm given to understand they actually give away that much money. But of course, he never won. But he thought, mate, what if? And I think though he never talked much about it, but I think he probably had some fantasies about what he would do with the money if he ever won it. Well, I sometimes slip into that. And the odds have got to be 1,000,000 to 1 that any of us would actually win any of these sweepstakes things. And yet, there's just this allure for me, maybe not for you at all, but for me, gosh, if I won that Rocket Mortgage Squares thing, gosh, 50 grand, what could I do with 50,000? It's pretty silly. Well, we live in a culture where the motto is more, just more of everything. Excuse me. Our collective mindset is, I don't have enough. I will never have enough. I don't remember whether it was Carnegie or Rockefeller who was asked, how much money would it take to satisfy you? And the reply was just $1 more. I don't know. I don't know that every culture is that way. And yet, I wonder, this would be an interesting sociological study, but I wonder if most people in most cultures wish for and dream about more. Well, one of the reasons we dream about more is because we don't consider ourselves rich enough. We're not wealthy enough. If you talk to and have a pretty in-depth conversation with anybody whose life has involved traveling outside the U.S., especially if you go to second and third world countries, whatever terminology you use for those, you come home. This happened to me every time not so much going to Europe, but even going to the Middle East, going to Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, even the Philippines, I realize, wow, I really am rich. All of us, every single one of us, in my estimate, could do something more if we had more, but in the broadest context, we are already rich. We just don't feel it. Well, Paul, he doesn't have soft words for the rich. He says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth. Well, that's from 1 Timothy 6:17. His word to Timothy, command these people, that's a strong word. Rich in this present world. Well, we already established. We're rich. We don't feel it. And, but you know what? Well, never mind. I could go on and on about this. I'm not one of those guys that says, well, if you're rich, they can't be. That's not what I'm saying. I don't believe that at all. I just realized for my own self, in my own life, God has more than adequately provided for me. And in terms of my wealth in this life, honestly, it's more than, it's incredibly more than my grandparents, more than my parents. Okay. You know, the Bible, all the way through, but in the New Testament, rich people, there are some pretty strong words about and to rich people, as in 1 Timothy 6. Well, and one that comes to my mind is in, well, here we go. Yeah. In James chapter 2, it to me is more than a little interesting. James, anyway, tells a story in chapter 2 about a poor man and a rich man coming into the gathering. And I'm just going to read it. If a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, and if you pay attention to the one who wears the fine clothing and say, "You sit here in a good place," while you say to the poor man, "You stand over there," or "Sit down at my feet," have you not then made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brethren, has not God chosen those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom, which he has promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man. Well, that basically doesn't have much of an application in our current world, does it? He goes on. Are not the rich the ones who oppress you and the ones who drag you into court? Are they not the ones who blaspheme the honorable name by which you were called? I mean, apparently, James didn't have a very high regard for rich people. Well, I don't know that that's fair. I think he was making a point. And the point is, the economic situation that we or someone else has is not the point. The point is, goes back to the words of Jesus in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall see God. You see, it's possible for a financially wealthy person to have this awareness of the poverty of their spirit. And in fact, the only way we'll ever connect with God, see him, is when we do acknowledge, accept, understand that we're beggars. Well, all right. I've been real negative so far, and it kind of goes on a little bit worse. So let's walk into it. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth. I have a friend who is worth more money than anybody I ever have known, but you'd never know it. He doesn't act like it. He's not driving a $75,000 car, and he could. He's not living in a, huge palatial mansion. He doesn't throw his money around. He's not Well, he is not arrogant. There are people, there are all kinds of people who are arrogant, but Paul kind of pokes pretty hard at financially wealthy people because if we're not careful, our financial wealth, even just our stability, can become a point of arrogance and pride. And he says, don't do that. And he says, don't be arrogant, nor put your hope in wealth. See, the only way you can sustain this arrogance derived from your wealth is that you put your hope in your wealth. And then he goes on, let's set it in reality, because that wealth is so uncertain. Well, how's your portfolio doing through this pandemic thing? Mine, not so good. It gained and gained and gained, and I felt really good about it. And in one day, boom, I lost a bunch. Well, I mean, that's the nature of the stock market. It's not going to always be a bull market. It's not always going to be good. It's going to have corrections and reversals. Well, okay. What I'm saying is wealth is uncertain. I mean, there's a lot of people that are, actually, I counsel people that one day they were making a great salary, and then they came in the next day and they were fired. And oh, by the way, there was no golden parachute involved. That wealth is uncertain. There are people who will tell you flat out, that nice house, it can go away in about 45 seconds if a tornado comes through, or less. Our wealth is uncertain. And if we put our hope in uncertain things, we have an uncertain hope. It makes no sense to put your hope in uncertain things. Now, I'm tempted to spend a whole big long spiel on hope, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to say what Paul said. Don't be arrogant, and don't put your hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. Now, he looks at the other side of the coin. If you're not going to put your hope in wealth that is uncertain, he says, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Now, well, there's not enough time left for me to go deeply into this, and it deserves a deeper look, but I'll just say, when you put your hope in God, one of the things that involves is trusting Him for His provision in your life. Now, it's actually a partnership where we've got, I am trusting God to provide for me. I learned slowly over time, and I have to remind myself of this all the time, but my paycheck, my income comes from three different sources. Except it's not three sources, it's really ultimately one source. God is my provider. Well, that is really difficult sometimes to bear that in mind. But if I put my hope in God, that's the antidote for putting my hope in my financial wealth, which is so uncertain. Trusting, believing, and acting as though we do truly believe God is our provider. And that's our hope. On the financial front, that's about our only hope. Now, I want to partner with God, and I want to be a responsible steward of my effort and the things I can do, but it's not ultimately about me. I must make wise choices, but God is the provider, not me. Well, we're coming back to that. Could you believe it? I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.